Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStreet Podcast. My name is Vince Nero, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Beth Nunnington. She's the founding member and global VP of digital PR at Journey Further. How you doing, Beth?
Hey, I'm great, thank you. How are you?
We're doing well over here, just getting over a heat wave. I mean, we're in very similar areas, so the rain is coming, but it's just July 4th weekend in the States, so getting back in the swing of things. But, today I think what we really wanted to talk about was not necessarily July 4th, but another thing that was having a moment right now, and that is PR. So I want to dig into that with you today, Beth. Before I do, I just want to remind listeners and viewers to like, subscribe, comment, engage on this stuff. The more you do that, the more you can have great guests like Beth on. So, Beth, let's start out here. Why is PR having a moment?
Well, finally, it's having its moment. It's been a long time coming, and I've been in this industry a long time, 14 years. So PR, I think, is really having its moment because, well, the search landscape is changing so much, right? We were discussing this before, like it's incredibly fragmented now. And I think us as consumers know ourselves that search behavior is no longer linear. So if we want to find something, we're not just going to Google and searching like we would do normally. We might search on TikTok, we might look on Instagram, or we go to ChatGPT now to ask more like complex questions. And so our audiences are searching everywhere. And therefore it's becoming even more crucial for brands to improve their visibility, not just by ranking on Google, but being across that whole search ecosystem.
Yeah, and the way you laid it out there, Beth, it's interesting because there's like the technical answer to this, I think, too, where and we'll get into this a little bit, brand signals and brand mentions and how they, are correlated to LLMs and stuff. Taking a step back from that, it's like the holistic idea of just meeting customers where they are. I feel like sometimes just gets lost in the shuffle with, you can fall down these rabbit holes in the SEO world and like, especially in the AI world where it's, really metric driven or I don't know, just kind of laboring into like the technicalities of how these things work. And you kind of forget that it's just, there's a person here and everybody shops in a different way or everybody looks for information in a different way. And like at the core of what PR is, it's like, gotta just get your brand out there, right?
Exactly. Like get your brand being spoken about by as many people as possible in as many different places as possible in a positive way. And I think the core essence of SEO should always have been about that customer, like about your end consumer. But for so many SEOs in the past, like historically, it's just been about trying to manipulate Google. And so sometimes it's been too easy to forget like why we're actually doing this, which is to get in front of our target audience and make people buy some more brands.
Yeah. Can I ask you too, because I know you kind of have made the switch over from UK to US. Do you feel this is kind of a universal thing right now? Is this movement, this moment in PR, is it international?
Absolutely. I think it doesn't really matter where you are. Like this is where search is going. Interestingly, because I am now based in the US, although I've got a British accent, originally from England, Google tends to roll things out in the US first. And myself and my US colleagues start to see the changes more in the US, UK colleagues do. But it always gets rolled out and things always change. And we're seeing it in the UK from like the search behavior perspective. People are starting to use social search, people are using ChatGPTs. Yeah, I think it's across the globe.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's kind of drill into some of this terminology here. And I've thrown out a bunch of them already, but like the idea of brand awareness, brand mentions, brand signals, brand building. I think when people talk about this stuff online, some of the thought leaderships, a lot of it ends up being like, well, these days SEO is just building a brand, right? Or it's just branding, it's whatever. So let's talk a little bit about like these specific terms and how they all overlap, if at all. So branding, brand awareness, brand building, brand signals, are they all just the same?
No, they're definitely not the same, but they are connected, as you said. I think, okay, so branding is more like the visual identity of a brand. So what a brand, like the look and feel of like a website, of a logo, the brand colors. And then I guess brand building is all about that brand positioning. So thinking about a brand's proposition, their vision, the mission, the values, what are their key messages and products, and then making sure that that is kind of like building a brand that way and getting that brand's message to their consumer through all different types of marketing. And then I guess brand awareness is the output of that activity. And
Mm.
so if a brand has good, if a brand is highly recognized within its target audience, then they've got good brand awareness. If, you can do studies, you can conduct polls, etc. And if your target audience has never heard of your brand or they don't recognize your brand, then clearly, you've got low brand awareness and there needs to be more done from the brand building side of things. And then I guess the brand signals are like the trust metrics that whether you're a human or you're, AI or you're Google, you're a platform, I guess the trust signals are what you can then use to evaluate how trustworthy and how credible that brand is, and whether you as a consumer want to buy from them or you as like a platform like Google are going to want to like reward them in the SERPs, or from an LLM perspective, you're going to want to give them that visibility. So they are different, but they all play a part in terms of what I'm describing as like building a brand's overall online entity. So that like digital footprint, all of those components are really key, but they're not the same. Does that make sense?
Is there a specific spot that PR kind of focuses in on in that? Because I love that it's kind of like the whole stream or path, that a brand takes from the brand awareness, or building the brand and brand awareness and these brand signals. Does PR touch all of them? Does it work more closely with any one of those pieces?
Does. I think if you're working in house in a marketing team, it's important to be like involved. If you're saying you're doing a rebrand, then you'd want to make sure that like, I guess PR has got input in all of it, or at least is aware of it. In terms of like the proposition, the vision, the mission, once that's been identified, then it's kind of the PR professional's job to think about how it takes that. And in all of the stories that we then tell, how that comes through. And so we can then help build a brand by, getting that third party validation, getting featured in publications, getting influencers to talk about us, talk about the brand. And then I guess the measurement part of that success is through the brand trust signals that then come off the back of it. And, I guess the end goal is to drive more sales and conversion. So I think PR has a big place to play because they need to build a brand. And so they need to really understand the fundamentals of the brand. So like whenever we onboard a new client, we always do a really deep dive because we need to really understand the brand in order to be able to promote them in a positive way and make sure that we're making them famous for what they want to be famous for.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, that's a good kind of segue, I think, into this next piece, because a lot of that, it's like what you're putting forth, right, as a brand versus what other people think about you. Specifically Google, I think is one of the biggest drivers, right? The biggest kind of audience that we're trying to influence, right? Or at least a piece of it. So can you talk a little bit about what we know about how kind of brand signals and Google interact?
Yes. And we obviously don't know anything quite for definite because Google,
Great answer.
fixed. Yeah. But we can make logical assumptions. And I think it's safe to say, like in the past, historically, Google has used things like brand signals in terms of links, right? That's what digital PR has all been founded on. And so it used to understand links. So back like years and years and years ago, when I first started in the industry in like 2011, as many links as possible pointing at a website used to correlate to the most visibility. But then it became incredibly easy to manipulate that system, to buy links. It got loads of terrible, dodgy behavior where, people were literally selling links and it became slightly corrupt. And the reality is that Google has always wanted to be like putting out the best results, the most relevant results for its users. It does not want to be manipulated. And I think over the course of what is it now, like 3 decades, Google has really fine-tuned its algorithm. It is so sophisticated. And with the use of AI wrapped around that, and its use of natural language understanding, it is so much smarter now. It doesn't need to rely on links the same way it used to because it can make association between a topic and between a brand. And it can make that connection without needing an actual link back to a website, if that makes sense. And it doesn't need to necessarily anchor text quite in the same way. So whilst I believe that a link is still a brand trust signal for Google search. I think more than ever, they are also looking at things like brand mentions, sentiment, social engagement, the bigger picture, because like they would be stupid not to. Like they don't want to be manipulative. And now they manipulated, they've now got to compete against, LLMs like ChatGPT. And like, don't get me wrong, Google absolutely still has the monopoly of search. But the likes of ChatGPT are increasing. Like they are nipping at Google's heels.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, I framed this around Google and relevance but to your point, like ChatGPT, I feel like is growing. It seems like, at least the last stuff I've looked at, seems like ChatGPT is maybe growing more precipitously than Google. Although Google already obviously has, like, it's hard to compare them apples to apples because they're, you know, the AI is built in. It's not like people are going to Gemini. It doesn't seem like that, in the same way that people use ChatGPT. So I guess what we're really talking about is like AI overviews, right? And manipulating that. Okay. So the thing that gets to me, I heard this study. I've talked about this a couple times on our podcast here, the Ziff Davis study that looked at the prevalence of high authoritative, high DA news sites that LLMs used in their training data to kind of curate this training data to basically get rid of all the crap from Reddit. So these are early versions of the training data, of early versions of GPT. It's like GPT-3 or GPT-2, now we're up to 4 for ChatGPT. And so is there really much definitively in terms of like the LLMs and brand signals? Like, have you seen any studies like this Ziff Davis one? Have you heard of anything else out there that looks into kind of how they work with brands and brand mentions and whatnot?
Well, I guess because it's all very much still in its infancy, and like we're actually building tools behind the scene, like we're testing tools as well. But even the tools that we use, like Ahrefs, for example, we are able to see like when a piece of coverage is being surfaced as an AI overview, but right now it's quite manual and it's like one at a time, which is incredibly annoying. But I'm hoping they are going to roll it out so it's a lot, faster and a lot more automated. But I guess in terms of studies, there was the one by Ahrefs that I keep using to reference with clients. So they looked at 75,000 brands, and they found that, so this is for AI overviews though, but they found that brand mentions was one of the biggest correlation factors in terms of what was being showed up more in AI overviews, significantly more than referring domains, which is links. I think that was like 6 on the list.
Yeah.
And I think this just goes to show, like, we know from LLMs and from our, like, what we're seeing, that they don't need to rely on, they're not using links. They literally use brand mention. What it seems is that if it's a brand mention, like with an expert comment, or if there's like data studies, so we do a lot of data-led PR studies, and we're finding that that data and that research is actually being cited in LLMs and then linking back like ChatGPT and then linking back to some of our clients, which is really exciting. Because not only are we getting great coverage on, authoritative publication, but then that study's been featured in an AI overview, or that study's been featured in ChatGPT in return from a query. Like we did one for an insurance client recently around like, Tesla's expensive to insure. And then our research and stuff was being resurfaced in response to those queries, which is really cool. And it's great because it's making our PR work even harder. And it's adding even more value to the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I was curious if there's anything specific that you recommend for people who are doing these kind of data studies. Are there any tips to get them surfaced other than just like put out fresh data?
Yeah, I guess make sure it's like genuinely useful data and that it's from a good source. If you're doing third-party research, you're going to need at least 2,000 respondents. Well, that's to ensure a journalist covers it. And I would imagine that LLMs are going to start like, again, they'll be sifting through because it's not about like ranking a list of websites. They're trying to surface to their end user like the best result. So they go through like multiple things. And so if you've got like the best data source with the most thorough research, then you're more likely to, be appearing. And if you've got an expert that's like legitimately authoritative in that sector, also featured talking about the findings, I think that's only going to cement it. because they are looking for credible sources and trusted like publications or trusted content.
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of brings me to the next question, which is kind of like the relevance piece of this. And, I mean, stepping back, like, is it the idea that like, is any news good news kind of thing? Like, can you just get mentioned anywhere? Should you just be getting brands just be getting out there and even these quote platforms like Quoted or Haro, it's like, should you just be flooding, the market here with your brand name as much as you can? Or how closely does an LLM like Google or Google's LLM, how much are these AI technologies looking at things like relevance?
I think there's two different things. There's relevance, and then there's sentiment. From a relevance perspective, like this is something, Jennifer, that we've been talking about, I think since day one, since I started like 7 years ago. And we actually built a tool in 2019. We were the first agency to build a tool using the IBM Watson API to measure topical link relevance. And also we could use it for on-site content relevance too. And because we knew and we were seeing that the more relevant a client link profile was, the more likely they were to be visible in the SERP. And actually that was trumping metrics like DA authority or number of links. And we've done many, many studies on this. I think actually you're even talking to...
Yeah, we're working on one now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So we've always been very focused on relevance. And the reason for that is because, I mean, it makes sense. Like Google doesn't want to put forward like irrelevant queries and results to queries. Like in order to maintain its best search engine, it's got to put forward best results. And I remember I loved it, like John Mueller, like a Google representative, he actually came out, I think it was in 2021, which really validated what we've been saying. And he was like, you can build as many links as you want to the website, but if they're not relevant, we'll probably just ignore them, or along those lines. And that just really summed up what we were seeing, that Google was becoming more intelligent now. And so it was able to kind of just reward the more authoritative sites, the ones that were being more relevant, because the irrelevant links tend to be the ones that were trying to game the system and be spammy and manipulative. So relevance, I think it became, and still is, a key factor, because again, if we just pull it back to our end goal, which is to get in front of our target audience, there's no point getting in front of them with content that's not relevant to them. So I think there's also the relevance from like contextually relevant content with what's then relevant to the target audience, if that makes sense. Like there's got to be,
Yeah.
about relevant
There's got to be a through line all the way through.
What's relevant in the news? What's relevant to the target audience? We're not just talking about boosting relevancy for keywords anymore, because I think, the picture's a lot bigger than. And then sentiment, I think sentiment is important. And I think from what I've understood about LLMs, especially from like ChatGPT LLMs, is that, again, because they're wanting to surface the more credible brands or the credible sources, when they're like, when it's searching the internet, it will take reputation into account. So if a brand has got really bad reviews or a brand's been talked about negatively online, it's going to make that connection. And so I genuinely believe that the brands that have more positive sentiment, that are more trusted, have better reviews, have better positive press, will be more likely to surface in those LLMs. I really believe that Google is going to follow suit. Like why would Google put forward brands that have got really bad sentiment? Because that's just going to make Google look bad. I tell you what's interesting. I really don't believe, I think a lot of PRs might disagree with me, but I don't think all news is good news for a brand. I really don't. Because I think it can have, like, again, you think about the target audience. If you've got loads of negative press and loads of negative reviews, like that is going to affect your end audience. And potentially if they've got to make a decision between buying your product or another product, say travel, for example, you're going to book a high price holiday. You're not going to go with the brand that's got bad reviews and had loads of negative press about not treating their customers very well, etc. And I think that's how LLMs would behave as well. Years ago, so back in 2018, we did actually work with a client who got their advert was banned by the ASA, which is the UK Advertising Regulation Authority. And they got loads of purchase off the back of it because it was like it was seen as like negative. But we issued a statement and we got the journalists to link back to the statement on the website because we were doing more of like an SEO-led approach for them. And their rankings improved. Like their visibility did improve, but that was in 2018. And I'm not convinced now that the same thing would happen in 2025.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to do some type of study on like negative sentiment, like whatever brands are feeling some negative sentiment and kind of map that to traffic or mentions. Yeah, that's really, yeah, I'll add that to my to-do list. I think that would be really cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. And you're right. To clarify, thank you. Like the difference between relevance and sentiment, right? Like you can be spoken about negatively from a relevant publication or something, but it doesn't mean it's a good thing in those cases. Okay, so the the kind of flip side of this, I guess, is when you get into brand signals and you get into relevance and sentiment, is like outside of, you mentioned a couple of these, like outside of some data studies, like what are some ways that you have done at Journey Further, or PRs can think about kind of fostering these new connections and like to build these brand signals that they need to?
Yeah, I think there's a whole range of tools that we have at our disposal. So thought leadership is like crucial. I think it's something that we know the journalists are crying out to speak to, like genuine real life experts. Like I've seen recently, especially in the UK, there's been a couple of examples where journalists have actually been burned by fake experts or fake stories because
Mhm.
they're giving us all a bad name, but they're coming with stories, and then the journalists are like end up falling for it. Like the Telegraph in the UK, there was an incident there, and I just saw something recently. Press Association, where one PR firm was talking about like lottery winners who lost their tickets in order to PR a gambling firm, but it was all made up. There was
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
and so I think more than ever, we're finding as well, like journalists are desperate for expert content because they also want to appear in the LLM. They also want to appear in AI overviews. They get publishers make their money from clicks, so they want the same as we do, but they're actually wanting genuine experts because they don't want to be speaking to made up people. So I think thought leadership and getting your brands and your experts within the brands placed within credible publications still absolutely should be like the bread and butter for a lot of, PR companies and focus areas. But I think instead of it just being like a written text piece, like thinking broader, like how can we do some video content, or like, for example, the podcast that we're doing right now, Vince. I was discussing this with one of our SEO directors earlier, and I'm wondering, and we don't know for sure because I feel like everything's still in its infancy, but if you share a transcript, online of this podcast, which it will be somewhere, or on YouTube or however, then surely at some point an LLM or Google is going to be able to read that transcript and make the association, between like myself and yourself that we are talking about this topic. And then potentially, in the future, it could be featured in an AI overview. Like that would make a lot of sense. And I think as digital PRs, we've become very, very focused on just thinking about online and publications. And actually, there's an opportunity to, which is, really refreshing for me, to reach out to broader, like different mediums. So get our clients on podcasts, get clients on YouTube interviews, or, even TV, because I've seen in the past that, TV then drives brand search, and that's a signal to Google. And so I think don't just be pigeonholed to online media. I think we obviously mentioned the data studies, but also like more creative activity as well. So we work with the recipe blog Inspired Taste. If you're into cooking, like definitely look at their blog, like they're brilliant. And we did last year, we identified that desserts was like a category for them that was in striking distance of really improving their keywords and their rankings. So we did a dream job campaign where they would, pay 3 people to become their testers for dessert, so they get paid to cook and eat dessert, and that got loads of great coverage. But not only did it get like coverage and links, it got so much interaction on social media, because in order to apply for the job, they had to submit, encouraged applicants to submit a video, and so they had loads of generated content, people talking about them on social. They've got like 20,000 new social followers, 6,000 people applied for the job, and like then their rankings like increased like drastically off the back of that all around desserts. And it was amazing because we weren't just thinking about it from like an SEO perspective. We were genuinely enticing their audience and getting them to interact and engage with it. And I think that's some recommendation I would say is think about how you can get your target audience engaged and building that community and trust signals through social. Like how can you get this content to be talked about on social media and in the platforms where your target audience are searching and where they're going to be, because that all plays like great trust signals back to Google, back to LLMs, but also most importantly, you're then getting in front of the target audience, which, as I said at the beginning, like that's what we need to remember as PRs. We're not just trying to please Google. We need to think about the audience and why we're doing this in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it gets me thinking about more of like the traditional PR tactics and like things like in-person events and those types of things that can kind of inspire people to do the work for you, right? Like to get the trust out there and word of mouth, build up, those types of things. I mean, do you feel like the industry is shifting at all towards those tactics? Specifically, do you feel like the digital PR industry will start adopting some of the more traditional PR tactics?
Yes, I think it's been merging for a while now, but absolutely. Because at the end of the day, like I keep saying, like, we need to be building brands and not building leads. And so, you and I have both been at Brighton SEO conferences. I've stood on stage and spoken, like when I'm trying to drive awareness for Journey Further, that's what I'm doing. And so we should be doing the same for our clients because overall, Lily Ray, an amazing influencer in the space and like very authoritative in SEO, she actually spoke at one of our events a few weeks ago. And she was saying like she's doing lots of testing so she can see how the LLMs then picking up on stuff. And like things like LinkedIn, stuff that she's putting on LinkedIn, or if she'll change like her bio somewhere and get picked up, like it's so easy for the LLMs to then pick up on things. And I think if you're trying to build your clients like expert profile, you should also be thinking about like, well, what are they posting on LinkedIn? Like, how can we help them grow a presence there? Because also, as a journalist, the first thing they're going to do is check that that person's legit. So they're probably going to go to LinkedIn, like if you're working in B2B. And so like we as PRs need to be thinking more holistically and connecting all of those dots together. And it's well within our remit and our skill set, I think, because it's ultimately just telling a brand story, but in a slightly different format.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, I think, because digital PR traditionally, I mean, as an offshoot of SEO, I guess, and link building has been so metrics based and like quantitative, but I think there are a lot of qualitative kind of pieces of this, but then also, like you said, like you kind of have to kind of step out of the boundaries that these artificial boundaries that we've set for the digital PR space in the past 5, 6 years or something, and realize there's a lot more to it than just getting links or getting a couple mentions. Okay, last thing I wanted to touch on, Beth, was measuring this, right? Measuring success in this kind of new paradigm or whatever you want to call it, because you talked about brand awareness kind of being, I think this is what how you did it. Brand awareness kind of being the like the output of your work, right? Like how much you're measuring, and then like the sentiment and whatnot. So has anything changed in the digital PR space when you're measuring this stuff? What are you looking at new for clients now with Journey Further?
So we've actually developed a new proprietary piece of tech, I guess, like our new measurement system that we're rolling out at the moment. And this ultimately is designed to measure a brand's online entity, because that's what Google is trying to measure. And when I talk about a brand's online entity, I mean the sum of all of its digital parts. Like we mentioned the digital footprint earlier. And it's like pulling all of those things together and then understanding like, okay, what's a bit weaker than others, and how do we then dial up this part of it? And so we've got a bit of a framework which we've coined it as DARE. So that stands for demand, authority, reputation, relevance, and engagement. And so demand is like, share of search, like search volume, which is a brand being searched for. Because if you do a successful PR campaign, like ultimately that you want to make sure that your brand is then being searched for more, because we're driving that demand and awareness. And so that's a big part of that. And then that kind of overall awareness piece. And then authority is thinking about like, okay, well, looking still at links, like velocity of links, people, like who's also speaking about you, like brand mentions, etc. Like then we've got reputation, which is positive brand mentions, because not every mention might be that positive. And then relevance is thinking about the typical relevance that we were talking about. So how relevant is that, is the coverage and the content out there to the brand? And then engagement, which is thinking about like we use tools like Brandwatch. So also looking at like how much is their brand being talked about on social media, how much engagement are they getting on social media? Because I think it is very difficult to just measure brand awareness on its own. Like there are tools that you can buy and they are very expensive. So we wanted to develop our own way of thinking about, well, what makes brand awareness? What makes a brand known? And kind of thinking about those components. And then we can give each one a score and then be like, do you know what? You've got great brand awareness. Actually, your sentiment, your reputation, your sentiment's really low.
Hmm.
or, you're not really getting that engaged. You're not getting a lot of engagement. You're not really being talked about online. So then we need to think about things in a slightly different way because every brand has a different challenge, and it completely depends on their industry. So I guess there's no easy answer really. You can buy tools to do it. We've developed our own way of looking at it. But the main thing is that we want to take a line in the sand when we first onboard a client. And so understand, okay, this is how relevant you are. This is like looking at your rankings. This is like kind of overall awareness metrics. And then in 3 months and 6 months time, after we've done XYZ activity, let's take another look and see how those metrics have increased. Like hopefully they have increased
Yeah.
the right work, then they definitely will have.
Yeah. How long is it? You said you're rolling that out now, right? My question is going to be just like, I just see this kind of stuff changing so rapidly, right? Especially with the AI tech and everything. Um, how how do you future proof something like that, right? In a world now that is changing so quickly, and all these technologies and the algorithms and everything is, I struggle personally with like, okay, how am I going to measure this in a way that is still going to be relevant in 6 months? Talk to me. What are your thoughts on that, I guess?
It's definitely tricky because, there is so many industry updates like constantly, but I think that the core essence of what we're trying to achieve and what success looks like, I don't think will massively change that much in terms of brand awareness. However, from like an LLM perspective, we are also developing ways to look at that too. Like in addition to this brand online entity, we're now like, okay, so that was built around more Google search. And so how do we now weave in all our findings from LLMs? Like how do we then add in, it could be to, overall demand, for example, or authority. Like we then weave in, well, this is how frequently you were mentioning AI overviews, and X% of that was from our coverage, and that was from like PR work that we did. Like, it's very easy to demonstrate that. And so that's like a constant evolution. But like we built our tech stack. We first built it in 2019 for Relevance, and then now we're just always updating it all the time. We're very lucky because we have a tech and innovation department.
Yeah.
Walker, I know you've spoken to him. He is one of the senior leads in that. And so I know not every company can have that, but it's something that we're really invested in because we know it's so important. So I guess, yeah, we just have to be adaptable and fluid and just make sure that we're keeping ahead of what's going on. I think the thing is, and if you like pull back even to like the beginning of my career, like 14 years ago, at the end of the day, it's about doing good PR. And like what is doing good PR? Well, as we said at the start, it's about getting as many people talking about your brand in as many places as possible. And it's not just anyone, it's based on your target audience. So I think it's actually something that we should be doing a lot more upfront, which we've started doing, but it's PR in general. I think really understanding the target audience is so crucial now. And I think that is a bit of a shift for a lot of digital PRs, because in the past it was like, oh, just get as many links as possible. It doesn't matter
Right.
it doesn't matter if anyone reads that piece of content, just get me a link.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like, no, we need to be strategic about this. So let's, we use like Spark Toro, we use like other audience tools to identify where is our audience searching, where are they over indexing in, like what platform, and then how do we make sure we appear there are audiences, because there's no point, you're never going to get discovered if you're not visible in those areas. And so I guess like that's kind of what the whole framework needs to continue to evolve to. But if you pull yourself back to the basis of PR, that should have been what it was always meant to be about.
I know.
It wasn't. And so I think digital PR has kind of got to kind of always go back to the PR roots. And then I don't think you can go too far wrong. I think what I'm a little bit concerned about is the people now are going to try and game the LLM,
Yeah.
and they're going to try and manipulate it. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few months.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of thing is unavoidable. But to your point, I mean, it's just, if you create content with the right mindset and, create these strategies with the right mindset, which is kind of appealing to real people, thinking about real people, real end users, I think you're going to be okay when it comes to future proof. So let's wrap up there, Beth. People can find you. I know you're very active on LinkedIn and X as well,
Yes.
and can also check out Journey Further, just Journey Further, right? Yeah, and keep a lookout. We are working on a kind of a relevance study with the Journey Further team, still kind of in the works, but using some of the technologies that Beth talked about. So excited about that. But I want to thank you very much, Beth, for coming on. And if people have any questions about any of this stuff, feel free to, leave a comment on the LinkedIn posts or, YouTube. You can email me, and I'm sure Beth would be more than happy to help answer. All right. Well, we'll talk soon, and good luck, everybody.